I never thought that buying meat would become the most exciting part of my day. But then I met him. Tall, with strong arms and a subtle smile, the neighborhood butcher had a presence I simply couldn't ignore. At first, it was just a casual habit, going to his shop, watching him work with precision, exchanging a few words. But soon I found myself looking for excuses to visit more often. There was something about him, something that pulled me in. And just when I started to think that maybe, just maybe, I had a chance, someone else appeared. A rival. Someone who was just as drawn to him as I was. And suddenly, this wasn't just about my feelings anymore. It was a silent battle. A fight I wasn't sure I could win. What happens when desire, jealousy, and uncertainty collide? Stay with me as I take you through this unexpected journey, one filled with longing, tension, and the kind of emotions you can't run from. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss a single episode of this story. Let's dive in. I never thought much about where I bought my meat. It was just one of those routine errands. Walk in, grab what I needed, and leave. But ever since I stepped into Reed's butcher shop, things had been different. It wasn't the smell of fresh cuts or the rustic decor that kept me coming back. No, it was him. Logan Reed. The first time I saw him, I was caught off guard. He wasn't the kind of butcher you'd expect. Rugged, broad-shouldered, and effortlessly charismatic. His dark hair was always a little messy, his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. There was something about the way he handled the knife, with precision and confidence, that made it impossible to look away. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing, just appreciation, a fascination with someone who clearly knew his craft. But as the weeks passed, I realized I was lying to myself. I started finding excuses to come back, buying smaller portions so I'd need to return sooner, pretending I forgot something just to see him again. And Logan? He was friendly, but distant. Polite, but hard to read. "Back again," he said one evening, wrapping a fresh cut of sirloin in brown paper. His voice was deep, calm, the kind that lingered even after he'd stopped speaking. I laughed, maybe too quickly. "Yeah, I guess I'm getting picky with my cuts." He handed me the package, his fingers brushing mine for the briefest second. I felt my stomach tighten, but his expression remained unreadable. And that's when I saw him. The rival. A tall, blond man leaned against the counter, watching Logan with a smirk. He was confident. Too confident. Like he belonged there. "Hey, Logan," the guy said casually, his voice dripping with familiarity. "Got my usual?" Logan's lips curved into a faint smile as he nodded. "Yeah, I got you." I felt something twist in my chest. I didn't even know this guy, but I already hated him. The way Logan responded to him, it was different. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe it was something real. As Logan handed over the neatly wrapped package, the blonde guy didn't just take it. His fingers lingered, his touch slow and deliberate. Logan didn't pull away. I clenched my jaw, suddenly feeling ridiculous. What was I even doing here? Obsessing over a guy who barely knew I existed? I forced myself to turn away, gripping the brown paper package in my hand. But as I reached the door, I heard Logan's voice, low, but directed at me. "See you soon." I hesitated, my hand on the door handle. For a moment, I wanted to believe that it meant something. But when I glanced over my shoulder, the blonde guy was still there, still watching Logan with that same confident smirk. I stepped outside, my mind a storm of emotions. I didn't know what I was feeling, jealousy, frustration, hope. All I knew was that this wasn't just about buying meat anymore. This was something else entirely. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. I couldn't get him out of my head. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, replaying the moment over and over. The way Logan's fingers brushed against mine. The way his eyes lingered just long enough to make me question everything. And then, the blonde guy. The way he stood there, so comfortable, so familiar. What was between them? I told myself I wouldn't go back to the butcher shop so soon. I needed to get a grip, to stop acting like some love-struck idiot. But by the next afternoon, my feet carried me there before my brain could even put up a fight. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. Logan was behind the counter, his sleeves rolled up again, a streak of something red on his apron. He looked up as I entered, his dark eyes locking onto mine for half a second before he went back to his work. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon," he said, his voice even. I swallowed, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, well, I realized I forgot to get some chicken yesterday." He arched a brow. "Chicken, huh?" I felt my face heat up. I wasn't even sure if he sold chicken. I should have at least checked before blurting out something so stupid, but instead of calling me out, Logan just smirked, grabbing a fresh knife from the counter. "You got a preference? Breast? Thigh?" The words shouldn't have sounded suggestive, but coming from him, they did. I cleared my throat, suddenly regretting my impulsive decision to come back. Thigh." He nodded, moving with practiced ease. I watched him work, the way his hands moved, the quiet strength behind every motion. He was confident but never rushed, like he had complete control over everything in his world. I wanted to be part of that world. But then, the door opened, and he walked in. The blonde guy. He didn't even hesitate, just strolled straight to the counter like he belonged there. Logan barely glanced up before greeting him with an easy, "Hey." The guy grinned. "Hey yourself." I gritted my teeth, gripping the edge of the counter. There was something about the way they interacted, something that made my stomach churn. Logan wasn't exactly warm with him, but he also wasn't distant. It was familiarity. A history. I wasn't part of that history. "You're working late today," the blonde guy noted, leaning against the counter like he'd done it 100 times before. "Yeah," Logan replied, setting my wrapped package to the side. "Short on staff this week," the guy hummed. "You should let me help out. You know I'd love to get my hands dirty." I had no idea if he meant it as a joke or something else, but the way he said it made my skin crawl. Logan just chuckled, shaking his head. "I think you'd be more trouble than help." It was playful, too playful. I clenched my jaw, reaching for my package, just wanting to get out of there before I said something stupid. But before I could leave, the blonde guy turned to me, as if just noticing I existed. "Hey man, I don't think we've met," he said smoothly. "I'm Cameron." I didn't want to shake his hand. I didn't want to acknowledge him. But Logan was watching, and the last thing I wanted was to look like some jealous idiot. So I forced a polite nod. "Nice to meet you." Cameron's eyes flickered with something unreadable before he smirked. "You come here a lot?" I hesitated. Was he being friendly? Or was this some kind of test? "Yeah," I admitted. "Logan's got the best cuts in town." Logan snorted softly, shaking his head as he continued working. Cameron, however, tilted his head slightly, studying me. "You two know each other well?" he asked, his tone too casual. Before I could answer, Logan beat me to it. "He's a regular," he said simply, like it was nothing, just a regular. Cameron's smirk deepened like he'd won some unspoken game. "Huh. Interesting." I didn't know what he was getting at, but I didn't like it. And I especially didn't like the way Logan just let the moment pass without correcting him, without acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, I was more than just some random customer. I should have left then, should have just walked out and never looked back. But something in me refused to let go so easily. Instead, I met Cameron's gaze head on and smiled. "Yeah, Interesting. And with that, I grabbed my package and walked out, my heart pounding. As I stepped into the cool evening air, I realized something. This wasn't just about Logan anymore. This was about winning, and I wasn't about to lose. I couldn't let it go. Cameron's smirk, Logan's indifference, the way I'd been dismissed like I was just another face in the crowd. It gnawed at me, followed me home, lingered in my thoughts when I should have been focused on anything else. I wasn't sure what frustrated me more, the fact that Logan hadn't treated me any differently than the other customers, or the fact that Cameron knew it. I had to change that. So the next day, I made a decision. If Cameron thought he could just waltz in and stake his claim, then fine. Two could play that game. I showed up at the butcher shop just before closing. The place was empty except for Logan, who was wiping down the counter, his sleeves still rolled up, forearms streaked with faint traces of work. The bell above the door chimed as I stepped inside, and for the first time I swore I saw something flicker across his face. Surprise? Curiosity? Twice in one day, he mused, setting the rag down. You must really love fresh meat. I ignored the teasing in his tone and leaned against the counter, mimicking Cameron's casual confidence. Or maybe I just like the service. Logan exhaled a short laugh, shaking his head as he reached for the butcher paper. What is it today? More chicken thighs? No, I said, my voice steady. I just came to talk. That caught him off guard. His hands paused mid-reach and he finally looked at me, not just in passing, not like I was another customer, but really looked at me. Talk, he repeated. I nodded. About yesterday. About Cameron. Logan's expression didn't shift much, but something in his posture tensed. What about him? I swallowed hard. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I was pushing too soon, but I had to know. You two. You seemed close, I said carefully, watching for any reaction. Are you? Logan exhaled, wiping his hands on his apron before leaning against the counter himself. Cameron and I have known each other for a while, he admitted. He's persistent. Persistent. That didn't sound like someone Logan wanted. That sounded like someone Logan tolerated. And you? I pressed. Are you interested? Logan tilted his head slightly, studying me the way he did his cuts of meat, assessing, weighing. Why do you care? He asked, his voice calm, unreadable. I hesitated. I could lie, brush it off, say it was just curiosity, but something in his gaze made me want to be honest. Because I think I'm interested, I admitted, my pulse hammering. For a long moment, Logan didn't say anything. His eyes flickered, searching mine, but he didn't step back. He didn't laugh it off. He just let the silence stretch, heavy, suffocating. Then finally, he spoke. Cameron doesn't like competition. I smirked, despite the tightness in my chest. Good thing I'm not afraid of a fight. A slow, amused smile ghosted across Logan's lips. But before he could respond, the bell above the door rang again. I knew who it was before I even turned around. Cameron. He strolled in like he owned the place, like he had every right to be here at this exact moment. His eyes landed on me first, a flicker of something sharp in them before he turned to Logan with an easy grin. Closing up? Cameron asked, ignoring my presence completely. Logan straightened up, his expression returning to that neutral, unreadable mask. Almost. Cameron leaned against the counter much too close to Logan for my liking. Figured I'd swing by, see if you needed a drink after work. Been a long day. I clenched my jaw. He was testing me, pushing, making sure I knew exactly where I stood. Before Logan could answer, I cut in. Actually, we were in the middle of something. Cameron's eyes finally flicked back to me, and this time, he didn't hide the challenge. Oh? And what exactly were you two talking about? I met his gaze, refusing to back down. You. For the first time, Logan looked genuinely caught between us. He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head like he couldn't believe he was about to deal with this. Cameron, on the other hand, just smirked, like he enjoyed the fight, like he was waiting for it. Guess I'm more interesting than I thought, he mused, his voice low. I didn't blink. Or maybe you're just in the way. The tension in the room thickened. Logan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck before pushing off the counter. All right, enough, he muttered. I don't need whatever this is happening in my shop. Cameron chuckled, clearly unfazed. Relax, Logan. We're just getting to know each other. Logan shot him a look that suggested he didn't believe that for a second. I should have walked away. I should have let it go. But instead, I stepped closer, making sure Cameron understood one thing. I'm not going anywhere, I said quietly. Cameron's smirk widened, but there was something dangerous in his eyes now. Good, he murmured. I like a little competition. Logan groaned, already regretting every decision that had led to this moment. But I didn't regret it. Because for the first time, I knew exactly where I stood. This wasn't just about wanting Logan anymore. This was about proving that I deserved him more, and I wasn't backing down. I should have known this was going to spiral out of control. The moment I stood my ground against Cameron, I could see it in his eyes. This wasn't just about Logan for him. It was about winning. And I had just given him the perfect reason to play. For the next few days, I held off from going back to the butcher shop. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed a plan. Walking in blindly, letting Cameron push me around, it wasn't working. If I was going to have a shot at Logan, I needed to be smart about it. And then the opportunity came. It was a Friday evening, and I was walking past Reed's butcher shop when I noticed something unusual. The lights were still on, even though it was past closing time. I slowed down, peering through the window, and there he was. Logan. Alone. He was behind the counter, carefully cleaning his knives, his face lost in thought. For a moment, I just watched him. The way his muscles tensed when he wiped the blade, the way his jaw flexed slightly as he focused. There was something so effortlessly captivating about him, something I couldn't shake. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pushed the door open. The bell above jingled softly. Logan's head snapped up, his dark eyes landing on me in surprise. You again, he said, setting the knife down. I hesitated. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I was pushing too hard. Yeah, I admitted. I saw the lights on. Figured I'd check in. Logan wiped his hands on a rag, leaning against the counter. Check in? He raised an eyebrow. You think I need a babysitter? I huffed a small laugh, shaking my head. No, I don't know. You seemed a little off the other night. I wanted to see if you were okay. Logan's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough. He wasn't expecting that. I'm fine, he said, but it didn't sound convincing. I stepped closer, resting my hands on the counter. You sure? Because if I'm being honest, you didn't look thrilled when Cameron showed up. Something flickered in his eyes. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Cameron's complicated. Complicated how? Logan hesitated. He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was deciding whether or not to say what was on his mind. He and I have history, he finally admitted. But not in the way you think. That wasn't what I expected. Then what way? Logan exhaled, drumming his fingers against the counter. We used to be close. Best friends once. But Cameron, he always wants to be in control. He doesn't like not having the upper hand. I nodded slowly, piecing it together. So, when he saw me, He saw a challenge, Logan finished. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just some petty rivalry. Cameron wasn't just interested in Logan. He was possessive. So, what does that mean for me? I asked. Logan's lips pressed together. It means you should be careful. I frowned. You think he's dangerous? Logan didn't answer right away, and that silence was enough. Before I could push further, the door swung open behind me, the bell chiming loudly. I turned, already knowing who it was before I saw him. Cameron. He didn't even hesitate, walking right up to the counter like he belonged there. Funny running into you two here, he said smoothly, his eyes flicking between me and Logan. I was just stopping by to see if Logan needed a ride home. Bullshit. He knew I was here. Logan crossed his arms, clearly exhausted by the whole thing. I'm good, Cameron. Cameron clicked his tongue. You sure? You work late. Wouldn't want you walking home alone. Logan's expression darkened. I said I'm good. Cameron didn't back down. If anything, his smirk grew, but instead of arguing, he turned his attention to me. So, he said, tilting his head. Still hanging around, huh? I held his gaze. Looks like it. Cameron chuckled. Gotta say, I admire the persistence. Then his voice lowered just slightly, enough that only I could hear. But persistence doesn't always mean you win. I clenched my jaw. Before I could respond, Logan stepped in. Enough, he said firmly. Both of you. Cameron looked at him, then at me, and for the first time, I saw something almost amused in his expression. You know what, Logan? He mused. I'll make this easy for you. Logan frowned. What the hell are you talking about? Cameron's smirk widened. If he wants to prove himself so bad, let's give him a chance. I tensed. A chance? Cameron leaned closer. A challenge. You and me. Logan groaned. Jesus Christ, Cameron. But Cameron ignored him, eyes locked on mine. One night, one challenge. Winner gets Logan. The room went completely silent. My pulse thundered in my ears. Logan looked completely done with both of us. But Cameron looked like he was having the time of his life. I should have laughed it off. Should have told him Logan wasn't a damn prize to be won. But instead I found myself meeting his gaze head on and saying, Fine, you're on. Logan muttered something under his breath, rubbing his temples like he was questioning every life choice that led him to this moment. Cameron grinned. Good, I'll be in touch. And just like that, he turned and walked out, leaving me standing there, my heart racing, Logan staring at me like I'd lost my mind. I wasn't sure if I had just made the best decision of my life, or the worst. I didn't know what I had just agreed to. Cameron wasted no time. He texted Logan an address, told him to bring me. Logan groaned the whole way there, muttering that this was the stupidest thing he'd ever witnessed. We arrived at a dimly lit bar. Cameron was already there, 2 drinks in front of him. Simple, he said, smirking. 1 game, pool. Winner gets a date with Logan. Logan rolled his eyes. I am not a prize. Cameron ignored him, tossing me a cue stick. I wasn't great at pool, but I wasn't about to back down. The game was intense, every shot raising the tension. Logan leaned against the bar, watching. I couldn't tell if he was amused or annoyed. Cameron was good, too good, but on the final shot, I focused, aimed, and sank the ball. Cameron tensed. I won. Logan exhaled, shaking his head. You two are idiots, he muttered. Cameron smirked, but his eyes held something darker. Enjoy your date, he said, grabbing his drink. For now. This wasn't over. But for tonight, I had won. The date wasn't some grand romantic gesture. It was simple. A late-night walk, Logan beside me, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets. "So," he said, glancing at me, "was this about beating Cameron?" I swallowed hard. "No, it was about you." Logan stopped walking, turning to face me. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached out, fingers brushing mine. "You didn't have to fight for me," he murmured. "I wanted to," I admitted. A slow smile spread across his lips. And then, before I could overthink it, Logan closed the space between us and kissed me. Soft, slow, certain. When we pulled back, I exhaled shakily. "That mean I win?" Logan chuckled, shaking his head. "Idiot." But he kissed me again, and that was answer enough.